Welcome back to the Liz Wheeler Show. FEMA's response to Hurricane Helene is one of the most scandalous things that has ever happened in American political history. And we are only just experiencing the tip of the iceberg here. Remember that FEMA exists solely to respond to natural disasters in the United States. Their purpose is to give aid to victims of hurricanes and tornadoes and floods, etc. And what they're doing now is the epitome of what our government always does. They are incompetent in their response. They are corrupt with what they have done with our taxpayer money behind the scenes, and then they are gaslighting us about it. For example, there's a whistleblower report from Congressman Matt Gaetz that says that there are FEMA employees who have been deployed to North Carolina and Georgia who are currently not helping the victims, but instead sitting in hotel rooms because they lack deployment orders from the higher ups in FEMA. They're just sitting there while people need their help. Meanwhile, they are blocking when private citizens, private charities, organizations are trying to bring in help, whether this is Elon Musk bringing in Starlink, whether this is my own church sent down a trailer of aid for these people, of stuff they need, whether it's diapers and wipes, food, supplies, medicine. They're being blocked. There's reports that in Tennessee, there are highways that are blockaded. Private charities are not being allowed to help people, even as the government workers are sitting on the side. And at the same time, we are told by President Biden that we have no money left. FEMA is out of money. Alejandro Mayorkas, the DHS Secretary, says, we don't have anything left for hurricane season. Our budget is completely depleted. But what did they do? They gave over $1 billion to build illegal alien welcome centers for this mass migration, the open borders mass migration that Kamala Harris has welcomed into our country. And we're supposed to, then we're told, when we criticize the government, we are told by the FEMA administrator, her name is Deanne Criswell, that our response, criticizing FEMA's response, is dangerous and violent. Take a listen to this.
So much is going viral online as well. One user suggested yesterday that a militia should go against FEMA. It got more than 500,000 views. What kind of impact has this had on the recovery effort?
It has a tremendous impact on the comfort level of our own employees to be able to go out there, but it's also demoralizing to all of the first responders that have been out there in their communities helping people, FEMA staff, volunteers, the private sector that are working side by side with local officials to go out and help people. I need to make sure I can get the resources to where they're needed. And when you have this dangerous rhetoric like you're hearing, it creates fear in our own employees. And we need to make sure we're getting help to the people who need it.
Oh, the comfort level of FEMA employees. Yeah, that's what I'm most focused on during this time of devastation in North Carolina and Georgia and Florida, the comfort level of the FEMA employees. Listen, George Stephanopoulos is doing exactly what the feds did with the Gretchen Whitmer fednapping. When Gretchen Whitmer locked down her state during COVID-19, she had lockdowns, she prohibited people from traveling from A to B, she forced people to wear masks, and they had the feds basically entrapped. They created this situation with a bunch of homeless people, drug addicts, and ne'er-do-wells, and had them stage or attempt to stage a kidnapping of the governor. And the reason that they did this wasn't because this group of ne'er-do-wells would have actually staged this kidnapping had not the feds suggested it, given them money to do it, encouraged them, and drove them to the location. They wouldn't. It was entrapment. The reason they did that is so that they could criticize anybody who dissented from the COVID lockdown narrative and say, oh, well, you must want to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Your kind of criticism of a government that locks down its citizens leads to violence. It leads to the kidnapping of these politicians that impose these lockdowns on us. That's exactly what they're trying to do to us right now. He took one example that you found on X. George Stephanopoulos found one example of someone saying a crazy thing on X that no one agrees with, and he's trying to associate any of us. If we criticize FEMA, then we are contributing to the fear of the FEMA employees. We are contributing to this violence that they anticipate will be aimed at FEMA employees. It's the definition of gaslighting. It's the definition of gaslighting. You know what this is? This is 2020 all over again. This is the COVID-19 censorship regime beginning to crack down on us for criticizing the government. Once again, it's the exact same playbook. In 2020, if we dared to criticize the lockdowns, we were then associated with the Gretchen Whitmer Fednappers. If we criticized the vaccines, who were we? We were told to question the experts. We were science deniers. We were contributing to the death of grandma. We were selfish people who really wouldn't do anything for the good of society. We were gaslit 100%. And why were we gaslit? Well, we were gaslit because we weren't complying with what the government wanted us to do. But it also played into this bigger picture, this bigger plan by the government. They want to demonize us because they hate us. So sure, that's one of the reasons. But the bigger reason that they demonize us is so that they can censor us. If they condition the American people to think that our dissent is violence, that our dissent is dangerous, then when they crack down and they tell us that we're not allowed to post questioning vaccines, that we're not allowed to post criticizing Anthony Fauci, then social media companies comply because they've been conditioned to think that this rhetoric is dangerous. That's exactly what we're seeing right here. The FEMA administrator is saying that she's conflating everyone's criticism of FEMA's botched, incompetent, corrupt response with one guy who posted something on X. Make no mistake, she's not stupid. She's doing this for a reason. We're going to show you exactly what they don't want you to see today on the show, because you know there's something that they're hiding when they are so afraid of you seeing it that they'll label you dangerous in order to censor you and silence you and prevent other people from seeing it. So we're going to break down that in just a couple of minutes here. We're going to start the show with a prayer today. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the other evil spirits who prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Did you guys see President Trump go to Butler, Pennsylvania? The return to Butler is what I've been calling it. He had a rally at which Laura Trump, by the way, said over 100,000 people attended this rally. An unreal number of people. The same exact spot where he was shot in the head 12 weeks prior. The courage of this man, I tell you. I cannot imagine it. And I'm going to show you this video in just a second. I cannot imagine standing on the same stage where a bullet literally hit him in the head, grazed his ear, and then 12 weeks later standing there noting the exact same moment, and there wasn't even a flicker of PTSD. Just an unflappable man, something to admire. So the number of people that watched this live, not only were there 100,000 people that attended the rally, 14 million people watched it stream live on X alone. And then, fast forward just to today, it's on X, not live, but the video exists after the live ended. 31.5 million people have viewed this rally. What? I don't think that there's been a political rally in the history of political rallies that has ever gotten that kind of viewership. But Trump started his rally in Butler with the most epic legend line that you'll ever hear. This is how the president started. Take a listen to this.
Lee, thank you very much, really. And thank you, a very big thank you to Pennsylvania. We love Pennsylvania. And as I was saying...
What an absolute legend of a comment. And he points to the Border Patrol graph that's being displayed on the big screen. That was the graph, of course, that he glanced at when he turned his head.
I love that chart. I love that graph.
Yeah, I bet he does. What an absolute legend. I mean, to be able to combine something so serious, so severe as an assassination attempt with a bit of humor, as I was saying, to pick up where he left off on July 13th when he was shot and bloodied, rushed off the stage, and to pick up where he left off 12 weeks later, that is epic. That is absolutely epic. At 6:11 p.m. exactly, the moment that the shooting happened, President Trump marked that moment with this. Take a look.
Time, it is 6:11, 12 weeks to the minute that the shooting began. I would like to ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence.
Gives you the chills every time. I've watched it half a dozen times now, and each time it gives you the chills. It also makes you wonder, in the aftermath of this shooting, I think President Trump made a couple of comments to some different people about maybe awakening in his faith after that experience, thinking it was the hand of God that protected him, and you wonder, playing Ave Maria, if that is in fact true. I'd like to think it is. He gave a beautiful tribute to the firefighter Corey, who lost his life at that rally. And I think the theme of that rally last night, whether they intended it or not, was courage. It took, so I can't even, unfathomable courage for President Trump to go on that stage after the Secret Service failed him in July, after the Secret Service only in the nick of time prevented the second assassination attempt on his golf course at Trump International, and then to go to the exact spot where he had been left unprotected, where a would-be assassin had tried to kill him and narrowly was prevented from success by just President Trump turning his head. To be up there again on that stage took courage. And it also took courage for those 100,000 people to attend that rally because of people like Corey, the firefighter, who was just a Trump rally attendee. He was supporting the man he was going to vote for president of the United States, and he was shot and killed because of that. It took incredible courage for 100,000 people to put themselves in that same position when they could be vulnerable to that scenario, that threat on their lives happening again. A beautiful event. I hope everybody watched it. If you didn't, go to X, take a look at it. Also, Melania Trump comes out as pro-abortion. A lot of you sent me messages over the weekend asking me my thoughts on Melania Trump's book. Her book comes out this week, and in the excerpts of her book that were released, she said that she's pro-abortion beginning to end. And yes, I'm going to give you my thoughts on that a little bit later in the show, so stick around for that. It's important to talk about that, but we have a couple of more important things to talk about first, including one of the worst scandals in American history, this FEMA response. What do they not want you to see? What are they hiding? They must be hiding something if they're gaslighting us to the point of telling us that our criticism of FEMA is dangerous and that it's violence and that it's leading FEMA employees to fear responding to victims of Hurricane Helene on the ground. Just the most outrageous accusation, which means that the scandal beneath the surface of that accusation must also be pretty severe, which it is. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but let me ask you a question first. Do you think that our country is going in the right direction? Or does it feel like everything is falling apart? I think I know how you would answer that question. If you're feeling alarmed, well, rest assured, you're not alone in this. In fact, Americans from all walks of life have taken action to prepare themselves for whatever is coming next. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 30 days. And that starts with having an emergency food supply. Storing food in your home, it's the right thing to do. It's smart, it's prudent, it's wise, because we are living in tumultuous times, to say the least. Which explains why so many people like you and like me are preparing for what might happen. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's not even what's going to happen in 30 days that's going to be significant. It is significant, but what's going to happen in 2025 is what's going to be potentially frightening. Right now, you can get ready for whatever does happen with a 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. It comes with delicious foods like creamy stroganoff, honey wheat bread, and mushroom rice. The entire kit offers over 2,000 calories every day, and it lasts up to 25 years. So whenever trouble may strike, you will be prepared. Who knows what our country will look like 25 years from now. But when that day does come, you and your family will be ready. Go to preparewithliz.com right now to order your 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. My husband and I have 2 pallets of this in our basement. We are prepared. We encourage you to be prepared as well. Go to preparewithliz.com, preparewithliz.com. All right, the FEMA scandal. This must be one of the most serious and severe scandals in American history. We have our fellow citizens in North Carolina and Georgia and in Florida who are devastated beyond anything anyone could have anticipated by Hurricane Helene. And FEMA, a federal government agency whose sole purpose is to provide aid and resources, finance, and help to victims of natural disasters, is not doing what they were designed to do. In fact, not only are they responding in an incompetent way, they are rife with waste, abuse, and scandal. So I want to start here by noting, and it's very important for us to note, that this is worse than Bush's Katrina. When people are comparing, saying, oh, this is Kamala's Katrina. No, this is much worse. So let's look at those 2 pictures. You remember this picture of George Bush in the wake of Hurricane Katrina in Air Force One, looking down out of the plane window. Yeah, there it is. Look at that. That picture caused almost unquantifiable damage to Bush's presidency. And then you compare that with Kamala Harris's, the picture she released in the wake of Hurricane Helene. And you have to wonder, because this picture shows her, I mean, the picture of Bush, by the way, is kind of benign. Maybe it looks tone deaf because it makes him look away from the wreckage. But really, the only reason Bush was demonized for that was because the media didn't like him, right? The incompetence on the ground in Katrina. Listen, I'm no fan of Bush, but it was really the local and state response in Katrina that were botched up. Bush didn't want to throw the local and state people under the bus. He easily could have, and probably should have. If Trump were president, he would have. But Bush's response after this photo was like pretty unimpeachable. It was the local and state response that was bad. But you have to wonder if Kamala Harris released this photograph after Hurricane Helene, knowing that it makes her look weak, it makes her look incompetent. She's slouching over. Is that headphone even plugged into her phone? It doesn't look like it. What is she even drawing? What's she looking at? What authority does she have? Did Biden make her the president? Is she the one making these calls? Because this picture makes her look like she might be. And if she is, then she has a lot to answer for. Let's just say that. But you have to wonder if she released this picture knowing that it was sort of a reflection of President Bush's Katrina photo, but knowing, almost thumbing her nose at us, because she knows the media will never, ever, not in a million trillion years, hold her accountable for her behavior the way that they pretended to hold Bush accountable for behavior that wasn't even his. So that's the backdrop of what we're looking at here, that the media is not interested in what's going on here. The media is not interested in the victims on the ground, maybe because they're from red states, maybe they're conservative, maybe they're Christian, maybe they're white, maybe they're not Democratic voters, maybe that's why they're being thrown under the bus. But there is some good news here. Kamala Harris is finally giving some money to the victims of the hurricane. Oh wait, money? It's only $750 each. Well, not each person. Each household is eligible for $750, but not everyone. Only if you're already on government assistance, only if you already have food stamps. And by the way, if you want to access that $750, you first have to apply for it online, and then you'll receive the money online if you're approved. But even if you don't have internet or a phone because, hurricane. But don't worry, Secretary Mayorkas says that FEMA is out of money anyway, completely unprepared for hurricane season. They're broke for the rest of hurricane season, no money left. I guess the nearly $1 billion, yes, billion with a B, that FEMA spent on welcome centers for illegal aliens in the past 2 years have drained the hurricane cash stash that FEMA is supposed to keep on hand. That happened pretty quickly. Your government, the moral of the story is your government hates you. The Democrats running the government hate you. It's not just incompetence on the part of FEMA, because I have to tell you, I am cynical enough that I expect incompetence from the federal government. I expect them to be bad at their job. I expect bureaucracy to stand in the way. I expect the private sector to be able to do this job better. Even with that standard in my mind, the incompetence from the federal government is not just incompetence. We have evidence now that they actually blocked roads in Tennessee. If you look at reports from people on the ground, there are entire highways in Tennessee that are blockaded. So private organizations, groups, and individuals who want to help the people of North Carolina and Georgia cannot get to them because the roads are being blocked. The roads are being blocked. And this is in addition to Elon Musk. We'll get into Elon Musk's beef with Pete Buttigieg in just a minute. At the same time that FEMA is saying that they're out of money for American citizens, Kamala Harris, Anthony Blinken, and all the elites in the Biden-Harris administration announced that they're sending $157 million to Lebanon. Foreign aid to Lebanon. What about your own citizens, people? What about the people, the American citizens who are hurting right now, who need FEMA response? Well, the federal government's broke for American citizens, but they have plenty of money to send overseas. And what was Mayorkas doing? This is a question that we should demand answers. What was Alejandro Mayorkas doing, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security? What was he doing instead of managing FEMA? Oh, he was shopping at a high-end menswear store, a store so expensive, so elitist that you can buy a suit jacket for $3,000 at this store. That's what Mayorkas was doing while FEMA, there were reports that FEMA workers on the ground didn't have deployment orders, so they were just sitting, cooling their jets in a hotel waiting for orders. There were blockades on roads that were preventing private organizations from delivering resources, and Mayorkas was shopping. He was shopping like a girl for high-end clothes. This at the same time that a 7-year-old child named Micah Dry drowned. He died. And if that doesn't gut you, just hearing that a child died, I don't know what to say to you. This child died calling for Jesus. His mother said he wasn't screaming for his mom in the moment of death. He was screaming, "Save me, Jesus. Save me, Jesus." And at the last moment before he was swept away, he said, "I see you, Jesus." And what are our elites doing to save these people? They're shopping in high-end boutiques, giving money to foreign nations that hate us. Elon Musk said that he was attempting to bring Starlink equipment so he could reconnect people for internet so that they could at least they could communicate their needs. And he was being blocked. He posted a video of this on X, and Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg said, this isn't true. If you have a problem, don't spread misinformation. Call me. And Elon Musk goes, okay, DM me, give me your phone number, and I'll call you because this is literally happening. My helicopter can't land. He spoke with Pete Buttigieg because it was, in fact, happening. I don't believe that this is just incompetence. In a town called Bat Cave, North Carolina, it's a small town, FEMA was going to go help them, but then didn't. And the reason why is because there was a sign on the road that said road closed. And oh, well, FEMA can't go past this sign that says road closed. It's a hurricane. This town has been completely destroyed. What do you expect? The road to be nice and smooth and paved, just awaiting your arrival? You want the red carpet rolled out? No, they couldn't go through there because the road closed sign. And yet they block roadways for private organizations who don't care if there's a road closed sign. Meanwhile, as if this could possibly get worse. This is, by the way, why the administrator of FEMA tells us that our rhetoric is violent, that it's scary, that it's dangerous, because she doesn't want you to see all of this, because this is so damning to FEMA. In September of 2024, that's last month, FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund monthly report revealed that nearly $4 billion was spent on COVID-19 aid. What COVID-19 aid are we giving people in September of 2024? A quote-unquote pandemic that ended years ago. $4 billion just in 1 month? And yet we don't have any left for victims of Hurricane Helene. I'm sorry that I don't believe that this is incompetence. This is corruption. And maybe this is like COVID. When I say corruption like we've never seen before, this has been building. The deep state has been orchestrating, organizing is a better word, organizing the agencies of the federal government to serve their purposes for decades, and it's finally coming to fruition. That is what we're seeing. We saw the first glimpse of it during COVID when we said, well, wait a second, we know better than to shut down society. We know better than to lock people away. We know better than to mask. We know better than to have vaccine mandates. And all the elitists, from Fauci to Biden to Deborah Birx, to Andrew Cuomo, who shut things, to Gavin Newsom. Unfortunately, the number of people involved in this are as numerable as deep state agents in our federal government. They didn't care. They were just using COVID as an excuse to put the control and tyranny in place that they desired from the very beginning. That's what we're seeing again. This is not just incompetence. If it were incompetence, I'd actually be the first to say, well, let's not have too high of expectations for government because they're always hamstrung by bureaucracy. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a government that is choosing other people over American citizens, whether it's giving money to Lebanon, whether it's COVID-19 aid, $4 billion in COVID-19 aid in September, or whether it's building these migrant welcome centers. This is what they want. These are their actual priorities. And when you actually talk to FEMA employees on the ground, Glenn Beck has undercover footage. He's in North Carolina, and he was talking to FEMA employees that were down there supposedly at emergency centers, these big trucks that FEMA drives in that are supposed to help people, not only give them aid, but help them sign up to receive more FEMA aid. These people had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. Again, maybe incompetence at the level of the employees on the ground, but not incompetence at the top that causes this. This is purposeful chaos at the top. This was Glenn's experience. Take a look at this.
But the app is great. The app, they can go on, they can upload documents through the app, so they don't need us.
Can I ask a question?
That's Congressman Corey Mills, by the way.
One of the biggest problems, though, is that most people don't have the ability, one, to even get on their phones to verify what is going on. How does people even know that this location exists?
So that would be the news media's job to tell everybody.
But they don't have power.
None of the news media. Well, I mean, I watch the news.
Well, no, the people who need the FEMA assistance don't have power. So how do they watch TV?
You would be surprised. They sit in their cars to charge their phones and listen to the radio. They're very, very well. That's how they knew the distribution center was here. So we're told to come here to get those supplies, and they don't know we're here really until they get here and we tell them, they see us.
But it is plausible, though, that those who, one, are either cut off from the location, because they're still rebuilding roads, obviously, at Cable Rest, or doesn't have power, won't know about even where this truck exists, or if it does exist.
Right, and there's no way actually. So we're DSA.
Look at Glenn's face.
Right? So what we actually do,
he is not having it.
And we actually go door to door. We go door to door and try to knock on every door in the county. And we go at the direction usually of the emergency manager, because the fire chiefs are going to tell us where people are, where things are devastated. So we literally go door to door.
So when does that start?
That's way above my head.
So we're wondering, we just asked, when do you guys go door to door? He was telling that
after we get the general stuff done, you know, we got to hit the mass people first, wherever the mass people are. So the mass people are here. Let's get them into the system as quickly as possible. Once we get the masses done, then we start going door to door.
Okay. How do people know you're here?
We just got here.
A week after the hurricane.
We were here yesterday.
Yeah.
And today's our first day with this unit.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow we're going to move the unit up by the car wash.
Oh.
Yesterday we couldn't do anything besides give them the information because we didn't have any Wi-Fi.
So how do people know you're here? Well, they can look it up on their phones, but they don't have internet and power. Well, they can watch it on TV, but they don't have homes. Well, they can listen to it in their cars. Their cars have been washed away. And you got here a week late, and you just want to get people's names in the system. You don't have actually anything for them. Do you believe that this is incompetence? It might be incompetence at the level of the two employees that were on that undercover video. That's plausible. I'll accept that. I do not believe it is incompetence from the top. And the reason I don't believe that it's incompetence from the top is because if you actually listen to FEMA planning for events like this is a FEMA meeting where they're talking about focusing disaster relief specifically on LGBTQIA people. Yes, you heard me correctly. Take a listen to this.
The shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity.
Disaster equity?
We have to do more.
Oh, please tell me what disaster equity is. Well, I'll tell you what disaster equity is. Disaster equity is picking and choosing who gets resources from the government and who doesn't, who gets help, food, water, financial assistance based on the color of their skin, based on their sex, based on who they like to have sex with. That's what disaster equity is. It's discrimination based on immutable characteristics that align with the Democrats' agenda.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. And so
women.
Absolutely. And so we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. And if we want people to be in an equal place, sometimes we have to take into account those disparities and do that work.
That, my friends, is evil. And that is FEMA. You'll notice she had she, her pronouns displayed on her Zoom call as she was presenting this idea. And again, going back to the beginning, we're gaslit. We're told that any criticism, if we criticize that, if we say that is objectively wrong, immoral, to pick and choose who gets disaster aid based on what they look like, based on the color of their skin, that's racism. If we criticize FEMA, then we are told that we are dangerous, that we are spouting violent rhetoric. And by the way, it's not just FEMA. It also trickles down. The North Carolina Department of Public Safety issued a fact check part on their website. What's the government? What role does the government have in fact checking? They should have zero role in fact checking. But the North Carolina Department of Public Safety put a fact checking part on their website that said it's a rumor that the federal government is blocking private aid from coming to North Carolina. But also, please, if you're an individual person, don't self-deploy to North Carolina. Okay. Just a little contradiction there for you. You see that? Catch that conundrum? It's fake news that we're blocking private individuals from coming here, but if you're a private individual, don't do it. Okay. Joe Biden, by the way, admits that Kamala Harris has a big hand in everything. He calls her a major player in all that his administration has done. So there's no way Kamala Harris can walk away from this, that she can deflect to Joe Biden, that she can wash her hands clean of the corruption that is right now. We are witnessing a piece of history, if you will, not a piece of history that we want to witness, but we are witnessing one of the biggest government scandals in the history of our country. Biden says Kamala Harris has a big part in everything that his administration has done. You can hear him say it for yourself. Take a listen.
There have obviously been a number of crises that the country has been facing over the past several days, with the hurricane, with the port strike, with the situation in the Middle East. Can you talk about how your vice president, who is running for the presidency, has worked on these crises and what role she has played over the past several days?
Well, I'm in constant contact with her. She's aware we're singing from the same song sheet. She helped pass all the laws that are being employed now. She was a major player in everything we've done, including passage of legislation which we were told we could never pass. And so she's been, and her staff is interlocked with mine in terms of all the things we're doing.
So in other words, this is Kamala Harris's fault, and all the accountability we should point at her. We should not let her escape it. The mainstream media is going to do everything they can to make sure that you don't tie Kamala Harris to Hurricane Helene's, the disastrous FEMA response to Hurricane Helene. But I implore you, make sure we hold Kamala Harris responsible for this. And you might ask yourself, what was Kamala Harris actually doing this weekend instead of engaging with FEMA, instead of trying to do what she can to help the victims of Hurricane Helene? Well, she was on a sex podcast called Call Her Daddy. If you haven't heard of this, I'll give you a brief explainer of what it is. If you have heard of this, then you understand that the vice president debased herself like no other vice president has ever done before. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But I also want to talk about what's at stake in this election. Don't kid yourself. It's not just Donald Trump and Kamala Harris who are on the ballot in November. The future of the Supreme Court is on the ballot as well. The radical left wants to eliminate the Supreme Court's conservative majority by packing the Supreme Court with their own hand-picked judicial activists in order to get the political outcomes that they want. Even President Biden has gotten into the act. This is not just some fringe of the Democratic Party. This is mainstream Democrat. Has gotten into the act by making reforming the court one of his final priorities before he leaves office. But don't be fooled by the phrase reforming the court. What he means is packing the court. At First Liberty, they call this assault on the court a clever name. This is what it is, a Supreme Court coup. The frightening thing is that come January, this Supreme Court coup could become our nation's reality. Simple majority votes in the House and the Senate, combined with the president's signature, could turn the left's plans to pack the court into the law of our land. That's why First Liberty is sounding the alarm, and why they need you and I to join them, to help them. If we take action together, you and I, if we unite our voices, we actually can put a stop to the radical left's plan to take control of the Supreme Court. As the 2024 election approaches, T-minus 1 month, we need to do 3 things. Number 1, find out where each of your candidates stand on the radical issue of packing and purging the Supreme Court. That's number 1. Number 2, share what you learn with everyone you know. And then number 3, do your civic duty and vote. Vote, vote, vote. The future of the court, of preserving it as an independent judiciary, is literally in our hands. If we lose the court, we lose the country. We cannot let that happen. That's why First Liberty is taking action. They need all of us to join them. With patriots like you standing for the Supreme Court, we can safeguard the independence of the judiciary just as the founding fathers intended. Go to supremecoup.com/Liz. That's supremecoup.com/Liz to learn how you can help stop this takeover of the Supreme Court. Okay, while FEMA was botching up their response to Hurricane Helene, where was Kamala Harris? She wasn't on the ground. I think I saw a video of her putting some things in a plastic bag, like, oh, rescue packages. Okay, it looks like you're sending a care package to your kid at college. That's not what the people on the ground need. Kamala Harris, it was really just for show. It was political pandering. Who even knows where she was? Well, I'll tell you where she was. She was on a sex podcast called Call Her Daddy. I am sad to say, for the state of our country, that Call Her Daddy is one of the most popular podcasts in the entire country. It is tawdry, it's vulgar, it's sexually explicit. I find it to be quite offensive, and I'm not a prude, but it's gross. You can go, I hate to even recommend that you do this, but if you want an example of what kind of discussions are had on this podcast, just go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and scroll through the titles of some of the episodes. You'll see exactly what this podcast talks about without having to listen to it. It's hosted by a young woman named Alex Cooper. She's Gen Z. She's promiscuous. She talks about her sexual exploits in graphic detail, and has guests on that do the same. A lot of Hollywood actresses go on and talk about, like I said, very graphic sex stuff. So why would Kamala Harris go on this show? Does that not debase a sitting vice president to go on a sexually graphic podcast that's just gross and vulgar and disrespectful and demeaning of women? Well, the answer is yes, it does debase Kamala Harris. But maybe Kamala Harris is past the point of caring whether she debases herself or not. She went on this podcast and she talked about, well, you guessed it, abortion. The reason she talked about abortion is Call Her Daddy is the most viewed podcast for women in the country. I know, it's a very sad commentary on our country. And listen, I'm not even going to sit here and debunk all the lies she told. You know that what Kamala Harris said about abortion and Amber Thurman and women's rights and Roe v. Wade, you know, all of that's a lie. You're smart people. I don't need to walk through exactly what lies she told. But I was talking about this appearance, Kamala Harris's appearance on Call Her Daddy, with my producer, Tim, before this show. We were discussing how we were going to analyze this. And what was interesting, actually, was not what Kamala Harris said, but the reason why she went on that show. I had said, well, she went on that show because Gen Z voters don't turn out to vote in as high numbers as other generations. And Tim said, okay, all these people that listen to her show are already left-leaning. And I agree with that. I think that's correct. And so the reason she went on there wasn't actually to convince anybody or to bring new information. It was just to get people excited to vote. It was almost like when she not walked out, but after Joe Biden announced that he was not seeking re-election, they installed Kamala Harris, put her up on that pedestal and said, she's actually who you're going to vote for, even though no voter chose her. People got a little bounce of excitement on the left. They said, oh, the first woman president. That's why Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy. Let me read you a couple of numbers that I found. Gen Z only has, of all the Gen Z, men and women, only 40% of them are registered to vote. That's not a very high number. It's the lowest number for any generation. Only 40%. So Kamala Harris, when you're campaigning, you're basically looking at a voter in two ways. Do I need to convince them to vote for me, or do I just need to turn them out to vote? Well, Tim is correct. These voters already lean left. She doesn't need to convince them to support her. All she needs to do is convince them to turn out to vote. It's almost the equivalent, in a way, of Donald Trump going on Theo Von's podcast, because Theo Von's podcast has the opposite people who watch. He has young men who lean right who watch his podcast. So Donald Trump didn't have to go on that podcast and convince them to like him. He just had to go on that podcast and convince them to turn out to vote. And there are a shocking number of both young Democrats and young Republicans who, even if they identify as Democrat and Republican, don't cast their ballot. So it's only 40% who are registered to vote. But of that 40%, according to a Harvard Harris poll, only 74% of young Democrats said they're definitely going to vote, compared to 60% of young Republicans who say they're definitely going to vote. So you could argue that it was a strategic move of Kamala Harris to go on this sex podcast, as demeaning and debasing as it is, because she knows that there are groups of people who already agree with her ideology, don't need to be convinced that they like her or her policies. They just need to be motivated to go vote. That's what she was doing on that podcast. So again, you know that she told lies. I know that she told lies. It's a longer project to convince the young women who watch this podcast that Kamala Harris is telling her lies. I hope and I pray that some of these young women see the light between now and Election Day in 1 month, but it's not a 1 month project to ideologically reclaim and reform people who have bought into generations of lies about life and about abortion. That's what I'll say about Kamala Harris's appearance on Call Her Daddy. But the perception that she went on a sex podcast when victims of Hurricane Helene need her, that's disgusting. Okay, a lot of you sent me messages over the weekend asking me what I think of Melania Trump's support for abortion. So let's just go back to the beginning here. Melania Trump has been very quiet during the second campaign of Donald Trump. She hasn't shown up with him on the campaign trail. I believe the only appearance she made, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the only public appearance she's made was at the RNC when Donald Trump accepted his nomination. Otherwise, she's been kind of quiet, but she's conservative-minded, at least from what we know of her political opinions. We know her opinions on legal immigration versus illegal immigration. There are reports from the behind the scenes. I mean, I have a pretty good inside look into what happened at the previous White House. I have a lot of friends that worked there. You know, I've been around this world for a while. She's pretty conservative-minded as far as it goes. So I was as surprised as anyone when Melania Trump, who has her memoir, it's called Melania, releasing this week, when excerpts of that were released last week in anticipation of the publication, showing her to be completely pro-abortion. Like, not even kind of pro-abortion or pro-choice. She unequivocally supports abortion from the moment of conception until birth. She said that there's no exceptions.
Individual freedom is a fundamental principle that I safeguard. Without a doubt, there is no room for compromise when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth: individual freedom. What does my body, my choice really mean?
A lot of people ask me what I think of this. So I have a couple of thoughts. Politically, it's not good timing. Politically, this is not great. Why would they release why would she release her memoir standing for a policy that is not a Republican policy, not a conservative policy, that this is actually in opposition to what pro-lifers and conservatives and Christians believe? Why would they do that a month before the election? Who do they think whose mind is that going to change? It's not going to bring any Democrat to vote for Donald Trump, but it is going to prevent, unfortunately, some Christians and pro-lifers from voting for Donald Trump. So politically, it's not a smart move. On a personal level, it's devastating that Melania Trump is pro-abortion. I mean, this is a woman who has a pretty incredible story. She's poised. She's beautiful. She was a businesswoman. She is conservative on many things because she was raised in a communist country. She's more freedom-minded because she understands the threat of communism. She comported herself as first lady as a woman to admire. And so it's disappointing. It's devastating to hear that she would support the killing of unborn babies. It's devastating, especially as a Catholic. I mean, she's a Christian, a Catholic. She should know that life begins at conception. We're made in the image and likeness of God. We have dignity and value, and women and abortionists have no right whatsoever to end that unborn life, especially for reasons of convenience, but for all reasons. It's just more egregious when it's a reason of convenience. It's also strange, isn't it, that all the wives of all the Republican presidents in recent history in my entire lifetime have been pro-abortion. All of them. We have these pro-life presidents and then pro-life Republican presidents and their wives are pro-abortion. It's very strange. Now, this shouldn't change the way that anybody votes. It shouldn't change the way Christians vote. It shouldn't change the way pro-lifers vote. I understand and empathize if it makes people less excited to vote. But first of all, Melania is not the nominee. She's not running for president. She's his wife, and she probably does influence his views on it, unfortunately. But she's not the candidate. Like I said, all other Republican presidents also had wives who were pro-abortion, and we still voted for them. But also, those things notwithstanding, when we have a situation where we have two candidates who neither of whom have a position as absolutist on life issues as you and I, we still have a moral obligation to analyze which one is the lesser of two evils on that particular issue, and then vote for that candidate who is the lesser of two evils in order not to validate, not to support, not to say it's okay that that politician has that view, that imperfect view, but to preserve the good that exists between the candidate who is the lesser of two evils and the candidate who is outright evil. There is good that exists between those two, and a vote for the lesser of two evils saves, preserves, protects the good that exists between those two positions. So it shouldn't be even a question in the minds of Christians or conservatives which candidate to vote for, because Kamala Harris is so blatantly supportive of abortion. It's what motivates her. That's the issue she cares about most. She believes in abortion up until the moment of birth. And even, according to her running mate's own legislation that he signed into law as governor of Minnesota, doesn't believe in giving medical care to babies born alive after botched abortions. Just the abject evil of that position is untenable. And while Donald Trump is not perfect on life issues, we know his record as president. He was a pro-life president, and he will be a pro-life president again. In fact, in Butler, Pennsylvania, J.D. Vance made just such a promise. He said that the Trump administration will defund Planned Parenthood once they are back in office. Take a look at this.
The question of defunding Planned Parenthood, look, I mean, our view is we don't think that taxpayers should fund late-term abortions. That has been a consistent view of the Trump campaign the first time around. It will remain a consistent view.
Okay, there you go. They're not going to fund late-term abortions, which you'd think would be an obvious position for every politician to take, especially because 80% of Americans, both pro-choice and pro-life, want late-term abortion banned, but the other side is a champion of late-term abortion. Okay, we have a couple more things here. Something really important is happening in the state of Maine. Believe it or not, Maine is so overlooked because it's such a small state population-wise, but it is a test balloon for a policy that the Kamala Harris administration supports. And this policy is regarding mass migration and the government giving for free housing to migrants and illegal aliens while stiffing American citizens. It's quite shocking. We mentioned this last week in the show, but we now have an inside look at these apartment buildings in Brunswick, Maine, where illegal aliens are given and migrants are given free housing in luxury apartments while the American citizens, the neighbors of these illegal aliens, are struggling to find housing at all. We're going to show you that in just a second. But first, I have something really exciting to share. They say no one reads anymore, but I know that's not true of you guys. I know that this audience are really voracious readers, and that's what I love about you. Our best and most important ideas, I am happy to say, are still captured in print, which is why we at Blaze Media have decided to launch a premium quarterly magazine that I have with me here today. It's called Frontier. This is the first issue, and it's just a beauty to behold. It's packed with thoughtful commentary, stunning photography. I'm trying to get an example of, it's just beautiful. You'll have to get it for yourself, Frontier, to see. And in original journalism from people like Chris Rufo and Mark Levin and Glenn Beck. It isn't just a magazine either. It's a flag being planted in the ground. I think you're really going to love it. Frontier is just the beginning of this project. As part of our new Blaze Unlimited membership, you will get exclusive access to Frontier, yes, delivered right to your door, along with a whole lot more. Blaze Unlimited is about taking another step forward, fighting back against state-run media propaganda, the forces trying to tear down the foundations of this country. As a founding member of Blaze Unlimited, you will receive a limited edition founding members card. You'll get even more behind the scenes content, VIP event access, and here's the big one, your voice will be heard. You will have a chance to have your voice heard. We want you to help shape the future of Blaze Media. We want you to help shape the future of Blaze Media and push back against the mainstream machine that's doing everything it can to silence the truth. The membership is about more than just sitting on the sidelines. It's about actively joining the mission to defend free speech, to uphold the American way of life. If you're ready to take the next step, go to blazeunlimited.com/Liz to claim your spots. Don't wait. You'll get this too. Frontier Magazine. You guys are going to love this. I know I'm obsessing about it because I know you're going to love it. Founding member spots are limited because we know this isn't going to be for everyone. But if this is you, if this is a good fit for you, then let's stand together. Let's push back, keep the spirit of America alive. Join Blaze Unlimited today at blazeunlimited.com/Liz. We are just getting started. All right, one final point before we go today. One of the most disgusting false accusations that the left has hurled at us, conservatives, over the course of the past decade is the accusation that if you recognize that open borders is dangerous, that mass migration is harmful, that your country, your community, your family is endangered by the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden open borders agenda, then you are told by the left that you're racist. Now, this is not true. This is false. But this accusation itself is the definition of gaslighting. They want you to think that you're crazy. You're crazy for what you think. You're crazy for what you see with your own eyes. It's basically like if somebody punched you in the face and, bloodied your lip and your nose, and you got the big black eye, this big shiner, and then you're told you're a racist for thinking that it hurt you. You're not actually hurting, they told you. Don't believe what you're feeling. Don't believe what you're seeing. That punch in the face was nothing. You're crazy if you think that's a bad thing. Well, that's what's happening in the state of Maine. In the city of Brunswick, the government is giving migrants luxury apartments for free. No rent, no utilities, nothing. Now, we talked about this briefly last week, and some of you guys were like, no way is this real. It's real. It's very real. And reporter Savannah Hernandez showed the inside of these apartment buildings, talked to the migrants who lived there, who said it's free rent for 2 years. That includes the furnishing of the apartments. I mean, beautiful couches, rugs, a big flat screen TV. None of this, they pay for none of this. It's absolutely free on the taxpayer dime. Meanwhile, the citizens of Brunswick, Maine are charged more than $2,000 for the same apartment that the migrants are getting for free. This is a working class town, people. A working class town. They can't afford that. The citizens cannot afford homes in their own town. And what's the government doing? The government is giving these apartments that were originally built for the citizens of the town. They're giving them to illegals and Kamala's migrants. This is Savannah Hernandez on the ground in Brunswick, Maine. Take a look.
How much is rent here?
Free. 2 years.
After 2 years, we have to pay the rent.
All right, y'all, this is Savannah Hernandez in Brunswick, Maine, reporting to you from the apartments where migrants are getting their rent paid for up to 2 years. Now, I wanted to give you guys a first inside look at these units. The migrants shared with us that they come furnished, so they have a flat screen TV in there, couches, tables and chairs, a bed. We also asked them as well, hey, are you paying utilities here? They shared with us that nope, they do not have a water bill, they do not have an electricity bill.
And what about the light and the water?
Everything is good. We don't pay anything.
Now, I wanted to focus in on this area of Maine because there is a housing crisis going on currently for residents, and these buildings were initially created for Maine residents, but then it was decided that homeless migrants would be living here. Now, as an American, You can rent out one of these units, but a 1-bedroom is going to run you about $1,800, and a 2-bedroom is going to run you about $2,300. By the way, the average housing price for a house over here in Brunswick is about $480,000. So there was obviously a lot of outrage when it was first discovered that migrants were going to be housed here for free on taxpayer dollar.
But remember, if you criticize Kamala Harris's open borders policy, if you rightly acknowledge that mass migration hurts your country, your state, your community, your neighborhood, and your family, then you are a racist, according to the left. And that is my final point. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter at LizWheelerNewsletter.com. That's LizWheelerNewsletter.com. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.